Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Sprint Jump Throw Performance Podcast. I'm Joel Reinhardt here with my co-host Andrew Cormier. Our guest today is Greg Carrasquillo. He is the Director of Sports Performance at Nicholls State and my former boss. Thanks for coming on the show, Greg.
Absolutely, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, so we're going to hop right into it. Greg is going to start by just kind of rolling over. He just finished his winter block with training with both football and volleyball at Nicholls. So we're just going to let him kind of rock on what was new, what went well, what didn't went well, what did he like, what would he double down on, all those sorts of things in his winter block, and then we'll kind of dive in from there. So go for it.
Yeah, just kind of breaking down the goals of what we went back. And obviously, every time that season ends or anything, you just reflect back on what your team really needed. We thought that a lot of our guys were really wound up and we needed a lot more soft tissue work and, essentially movement pattern correction for a good amount of them. So that's really where we kind of just dove into right away. With that, we kind of just broke down our warm-ups a little bit more, extended them out some, and then really went from there. So main goals for us were tissue quality, movement efficiency, and then we actually wanted to divide up our groups into, advanced guys, team guys, developmental guys a little bit more and kind of make it really specific for them there. So we went with just a basic 4-day split. What we did this year that kind of really worked out for us, we split our training sessions up into 2 completely different sessions. So we had our speed movements and conditioning in the mornings at 6 a.m. or 6:30 with our guys, which allowed us to have a little bit more, make sure, 1, the entire team is there. And then 2, we can really kind of roll through and break them down into stations to get what we want. And then we did 3 groups in the afternoon, and we broke them down into team, advanced, and developmental guys. We went with a basic high-low split, 4 days. Really, it came down to about a 3-day split on what we wanted to. So our day 1, speed, lower body dominated movements, right? Day 2 was conditioning, extended tempo day, and then an upper body lift. Wednesday was off. Thursday ended up becoming a high day for us, is going change of direction and multi-directional speed day in the morning, and then total body lift in the afternoon. And then Friday for us is a big team setting for us, so our coach gets pretty involved with it, wants to do some high intensity conditioning in that aspect, and then we come in the weight room and finish off with just a little upper body swole session to kind of finish it off that way. But luckily for me, I kind of got him to give me that first day of conditioning for us, which meant that, we could have those tempo day runs in. And then if we wanted to finish off the week on a really hard, high intensity day for him, we kind of got that down to 1 day a week there, which was really big for us because in the past, we've gone those 2 days of conditioning where coach wanted to get really involved and, get those mat drill style things going and, protect the houses and run the stadiums and things along those lines. So getting that back, that we could get 1 day of just an extended tempo and really kind of get those guys to recover, really helped us out a good amount from that. So with that, we kind of took those having a break in the second half of the day, as far as having a team come in to lift on their own, not coming in right from a running session or anything like that. We allowed ourselves to really extend out our warm-up a little bit more and dive into some of the new stuff coming out, the pails rails, the FRC work that we've been doing, and really trying to implement that into a team setting the best that we could. Lucky for me, this year we've had a good amount of staff with us. We've had 5 guys that coach alone, and then myself kind of leading the whole group. So everyone's kind of working with about 2 or 3 guys at a time individually, and we could really kind of hone in on what we're trying to get out of those movements. And with that, we saw a lot of big movements, especially from our big guys. Those guys are kind of movement impaired a lot anyway. And we were able to get a lot more range of motion out of them, get them in better stances overall. Looking forward to where it was going to take us for spring ball, but obviously with situation we got right now kind of stopped us a little bit. And then for the big part is we kind of allowed ourselves with that new FRC work to get into new ranges of motion and get into some extreme ranges of motion when we lift, and try to develop strength in there as well. So we put everybody up on our wedges, our heel wedges, got them through full range of motion, put an extensive tempo work on them for that, making sure that we're strong in those new ranges of motions that we just developed between our pails, rails, and cars, which gave us, again, a little bit more transfer. We could see a lot more sprint starts, getting a lot more efficient. But the biggest thing for us was increasing that range of motion and getting guys strong into it. Most of our guys came out of every session and felt better every single day, overall body-wise, on a regular basis. So those are definitely things that we're going to dive into a lot more. in this time where we have a lot of time to learn, that's really what the people I'm talking to about is how we're going to implement these things in a group setting on a regular basis. Um, and I think for a first time really trying to implement it, it worked out really well, and it's definitely an area that we're going to want to dive into a lot more. So
Sweet. Yeah. So with the implementing the FRC at kind of a large scale, how did you go about um, deciding like, okay, these are going to be our priority movements based off? Did you kind of generalize throughout the team, or was it more position? Linemen are going to focus more on this, skill guys, or was it more dependent on just individual? Like this guy needs hips, this guy needs shoulders, or how did you split up in that aspect?
yeah, for our first time implementing it, I think we just kind of made more of a generalization. So we looked at what joints do we need to be mobile, right? Ankle, knee, ankle, hip, uh, shoulder, right? All those things, and we kind of really dove into that, taking some of that FMS style of corrective hierarchy and trying to really work with that. So we figured if we fixed up hips, fixed up ankles, and picked up shoulders, odds are everything else is going to kind of really fall into place as we go through there. And then we broke it into days that we did it. So lower body days, we put a major emphasis on our hips and our ankles. Upper body days, we put a big emphasis on our shoulders. Now, some of the injured guys that we had, we were able to put more emphasis on them in the areas that they needed it. But guys that just had general issues all the time. So if we know, this guy's got ankle work and he's got ankle problems, and that's really his major problem, we're going to try to get him to do a little bit more on his own also, in between sets or whatever it is that can maybe possibly help him out in that way.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So like you said, with you developing these brand new ranges of motion, like you might have a kid, or just for round numbers, he's a 400-pound front squatter, but he gets to what maybe like right at parallel what we're looking for. And if you develop all these amazing new ranges of motion at his hip, ankle, and all of a sudden he's sitting his butt on his heels, like you said, how do you manage? Like, did you see any like not necessarily drop offs, but like maybe deficit? Like, oh, this kid was super strong, even to like a solid range of motion. We've opened up all these great ranges of motions. Did you see any like sort of deficits there in terms of like, oh, when we actually go butt to heel, like he's not as strong, or did you have to like peel back at all in that aspect?
We didn't really necessarily at first, yes. But obviously with us, we kind of tempoed that out a little bit. So the loads that we were using weren't necessarily maximal for them. Speed might have been slower, but that's just, again, with that effort that they're giving on that day for that new range of motion, that's what we're going to get out of them. But when we actually did transfer it over, so we did 6 weeks of being our heels elevated, getting us new range of motion on that too. When we flipped them down to a flat foot, right, with the new increase in range of motion that we have, we actually saw the bar speed kind of accelerate a little bit more. And I think that is just coming from freedom of movement, and being easier to get into those ranges of motion as opposed to feel like they're pulling themselves in a position they're not really comfortable with. So I think that confidence-wise for them also, but then I think once they figured out what they are really capable of as far as range of motion-wise, I think they were able to attack it a little bit better, and it actually helped them out.
Cool. Have you seen any sort of difference across maybe position groups, or I know like from my experience when I was working with you, we had some skill guys that were, Achilles tendon went almost all the way to their knee, like all sorts of toned up. And then maybe, get the flip side of that where it's some super force dominant linebacker versus a super toned up, wiry wide receiver. Like, did you see any sorts of differences in terms of, like super tendony elastic dudes versus more muscular dudes and how they responded to the FRC work?
I think the guys who, the guys who are more muscularly, and they're tending to kind of maybe a little bit more loose, got I think a little bit more out of it. Just from that stiffness, being able to kind of release that tendon a little bit, that's kind of wrapping them up, and then again that isometric contraction and basically all of those movements kind of freed them up range wise a little bit. I think for our skill guys, it took away a lot of those major like tendonitis issues and things along those lines because it gave them, again, a little bit more range of motion that we could train in, put some more time under tension into them. Again, and essentially FRC, from learning off of it, is basically an isometric contraction the entire time, allowing that tendon to kind of relax a little bit if hold them out for a long time.
Yeah, I agree. I guess I hadn't really thought about it in that aspect where it's like, especially even with our injured guys here, like implementing a lot of long duration isometrics, but didn't even really cross that bridge of like, the FRC stuff is also isometrics. It's different. Some of it's more closed range instead of end range, but it's still kind of a long duration ISO. So I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
Greg, did you take anything from just the general principles? I mean, I know we're talking about isometrics, but did you see anything from the FRC system within the principles that you applied to like the greater general movements? I know you kind of did it with squat, but did it kind of change your mind about how you looked at other just weight room exercises?
To an extent, yes. A lot of time, I mean, with our overhead pressing, we saw a lot of differences in it, as well. Again, just getting that more control in that end range of motion overhead. I think when you look at any athlete, basically, extended or flex position, like they're going to be tough to get up there. And if they are there, then, great. But if they're not, building that end range of motion with that movement helps us out a lot. And then again, working that shoulder on our upper body days, definitely helps with our squat pattern as well on our lower body days, and kind of, vice versa with everything that we do. So I think, again, fixing those things majorly overall, hip, ankle, and shoulder just helped out movement flow in general.
Yeah, for sure. Especially in a team setting, like, yeah, you can. Well, I mean, you see it with pretty much anything. Like, even like, okay, coaching up sprint technique. Like, yeah, we could get into the individual of this kid needs this and this kid needs this. But in general, you can identify team-wide, ailments, and then just kind of attack those. And then when you get super advanced, kind of diving into those individual needs. But yeah, I like that a lot.
Just taking that kind of, I mean, we didn't do it this year, but, in the future, we definitely want to take some pre and post range of motion assessments, especially maybe not with everybody, but, with, some of our major players or guys that we know are wound up a lot, just to show them the difference overall. Luckily for us this year, we got a transfer come in that was really into his body. So he was basically in the weight room every single day, trying to drag people in, and we got them on such a one-on-one basis working with this stuff that when it came to doing it in a team setting, basically we put two, the way our weight room set up, we got racks on one side, racks on the other, Joel. You know how it is. And we just put two lines, and we said one line here, everybody get into this position. This is what we're looking for. And then we had coaches fly around and coach it up. And, for us, it got everybody on the same page, as opposed to, when you have stations rolling on with it and you have different people in different areas, kind of guys will not necessarily focus as much. But when you have one and you really take the entire time to emphasize, hey, we're going to take 5 to 10 minutes right here, and we're going to do this because it's important, kind of opens up guys a little bit. Again, it comes down to your athletes are going to think what's important is what you emphasize on a regular basis. And if you don't ever emphasize movement as being important, then they're just going to think that the weight room and lifting weights is the important part of it as well. So we decided that as a staff, is that what we really needed to do was take our time, slow it down, do this as a team in this setting, and then we'll be able to kind of, pull people individually where we need to.
Yeah, that kind of flows perfect. Andrew and I and our whole staff here at UMass, we Zoom called on Wednesday with Tim Karen, and he went over with us how he's implementing FRC. And that's exactly one of the things he touched on was it's got to be like, you can just kind of, it's one of those things where you can go through the movements, the cars, the pails, the rails. And even if you're operating at, it's similar to speed work where you can look like you're running fast, but if you might be running at 85% and you're not getting much out of it. Same with the cars, pails, rails. But if it's like 100% intent and focus, that's where you're really going to get the benefit. And so just plopping it at the end and being like, hey, make sure you hit your cars before you leave. Like, it sends the message of, hey, it's not actually that important. That's why we're not emphasizing it. So I think that ties in perfect with what we were learning the other day was like, if you want it to be done well, like you can do it. You can just throw them in and be like, all right, and shoulder all the way around and, those sorts of things. But if you actually want it done well and get real benefits out of it, yeah, it's got to be emphasized. And I feel like that goes with almost anything included in a program, but it's good to see it.
Yeah, I mean, for us, when we did that in that setting too, and we slowed it down, it gave us that feedback that we were looking for. Because like you said, if you go through it, and you do a shoulder and everyone's just like, oh, that's not bad. But when you have those guys that do it and they're like, holy crap, you know what I mean? Like that feels a little bit different. They you can tell they're working. That's where that big action comes into play. So it gives us some feedback as well too by slowing it down, as opposed to, like you said, just putting it in somewhere and hoping that guys do it the right way.
Yeah, for sure.
Greg, has anyone from your guys' sports med side gotten interested in that at all either? Because I feel like there's definitely some good application that can kind of be bridged between like a sports performance and a sports med department, with kind of both sides teaching it and helping with the return to play or just general rehab process?
Yeah. So we actually got a new athletic trainer this year, Tyler Trahan, for us, and he's done a great job. When he first got here, especially, we did a bunch of FRC work in the athletic training room alone. So that kind of opened up guys. And then the biggest thing for us is when they connect it to each other. So if we're doing it in the AT room and the weight room, this got to be important. This really has to be important for us in our bodies and how it works. The big selling point is when you get the coach to buy in too, and possibly allow you in a warm up or something along those lines to kind of get that going in too, because then you're getting all three areas involved at once. So
for sure.
Is that something you want to like sneak in on your, like, hey, it's pre-practice, maybe it's not full team, maybe it's individual groups or whatever, but is that something you would want to like try to sneak in? Because like you're saying, if you're making it important, or maybe like you just got off the bus on a road trip and you hit it in a hotel ballroom or something like that. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, so obviously during practice time, coaches don't want warm-up to take longer than 30 seconds because they want to
Yeah.
practice. So what we've kind of done a little bit is put guys in those, like, because not to, discredit coaches or anything, but like a lot of times they don't know what you're doing in a warm-up. They just think, hey, we're getting our guys ready to play. So what we do is we'll just put them in a 90-90 position and have them go through some things, and we're warming up, and it's just, hey, we're just sitting in this position for a little while to kind of get going. And you do that to kind of start off, as opposed to like touching your toes or doing some static stretches, which coaches want to see. Now you're just telling them, hey, this is just a different form of what you're looking for anyway, but it's better for the guys. And they do it. And then when they see the results, it happens. And, you do your job on your own of educating them the best you can. But yeah, trying to sneak things in there every once in a while to try to get it going. And then you just ramp them up, get your leg swings, get your, world's greatest stretch, and then high knees, butt kicks, get them going. But at least you got some of the main emphasis of range of motions back. I was just talking to Brandon Howard about this, actually, because I think at Texas Tech, they do a really good job of implementing the FRC with that. He suggests, honestly, don't ever do any type of ankle cars or ankle pails or rails right before you sprint, just because of that new range of motion that you just developed, and you might not have the strength in it right away. So you can see a lot of injuries in that aspect. But, trying to hit those key points of the hips, make sure that they're right to go before practice and then go. Now, if you could get a guy, when I was with the Jets, we had all the guys come in individually, and we weren't at FRC at that point, but we had them do all their corrective exercises, before they went out to practice. They had 5 minutes of just correcting exercises, go out, and then we had a team warm up like we normally did and did it. So if you had those guys that are really committed to their bodies and taking care of it, and you have an open weight room at the time, we've had guys come in and hey, coach, can we work on this before we go out there? And, you just got to be there and be there available for them. But again, getting that buy-in from individuals will eventually lead a buy-in from a whole group, which makes it a lot easier to coach.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. I mean, because I feel like we've definitely got, and I feel like every team I've been around has some athletes where it's high intensity outputs, they still need to like feel that stretch or like get that static stretch. And as much as you're like, this research article says it'll, like, they don't care. But I mean, that's a good idea of just like sneaking in your FRC, because all they see is like the static, like range of motion aspect of it. So it might even check the box of making them happy, but then, you're actually getting quality work in and getting closer to, whatever your end goal is. So I like that.
I mean, that's just a mental thing for a lot of guys. I mean, when we were here and guys would come up to us in the middle of the game, could you stretch my hamstring? And you'd be like, yeah, lay on your stomach. We're like going to do some RPR work. I don't know, like, oh, that feels a lot better. It's like, yeah, you know what I mean? Like, if you really feel like you need to be stretched, then you get stretched. Like, that's going to mentally get you prepared for whatever it is, for that day. But if there's something better that we could throw at them, then why not?
Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome. That's awesome. From a did you see any sorts so I know you said you did like the big group, like early on, like how long do you think like the learning curve was for guys in terms of learning, like, hey, you're going to crank your knee up towards your chest, your hip's going to cramp, push through it. Like, how long do you think that was? It just like a session or two, or did it take a good couple of weeks before you think you got like good quality work out of it?
I think that's more of an individual basis. I think from some guys understanding that, hey, this is going to be uncomfortable for a little bit, is going to be what it is. And then we had some guys that every time they'd cramp up and they try to walk it off. And I'm just like, no, sit back down, get back to position and do it. That's cramping up because it probably hasn't fired in the right way in a very long time. So we're going to get that going in the right way. So it's really individualized. And I think from my aspect of it is when you get those major leaders in your team, if you get them individually bought into it, they'll start to open their mouth up a little bit because they don't want to sit around and wait for the same guy over and over again to get back in his position and get set up because we're going to do it until everybody does it type of deal in that aspect. So individually wise, a lot of our younger kids, the freshmen that don't necessarily come from that aspect of taking care of your body in the long run, this is what we're going to implement with them, especially when they first come in June. Because at that point they shouldn't know any better, and what we ever emphasize when they come into us is what they think is going to be the norm for the next 4 years or 5 years of their life. So we're going to put a major emphasis on that, and then work our tempo, range of motion as far as our lifts go wise. But we think that that's going to be the biggest factor of us getting better in that aspect.
Sweet. So pivoting a little bit, so both from when I was down with you at Nicholls State and then even moving forward, you're in a position where you're the director of sports performance, and you've got, in our time that I was there, Taylor took over as, your first real full-time assistant working with basketball. But then apart from that, you've got some GAs and part-time assistants. So I think it's a position that a lot of people in the country are in, is where, have a decent amount of staff turnover with young people. Young coaches coming up, they get good opportunities, work well for you, and then move on if they're in a GA or part-time position. How do you go about building kind of a system of continuity for, I guess, both the student athlete and yourself as the director to keep some sort of continuity even when you do have decently regular, maybe yearly or every other year type of turnover?
Yeah, I think that's one of the hardest things, just in my position as we go through. Mostly it's really hard for our athletes, I think. So our system of doing it is kind of, it takes that stress off of them a little bit, where every time they come in the weight room, we're going to take our staff through this way of coming through of, hey, we're going to do some soft tissue work, we're going to get some mobility, we're going to hit some core work, we're going to hit some pillar strength, and then we're going to hit our, Olympic movements and work our way down from there, or explosive movement, work your way down from there. That gives a little bit of a regularity for our athletes overall, which makes it a little bit easier for them to just get that new coaching from somebody else. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing as far as athletes go, just getting to meet somebody new, learning to trust them, and doing, what they do. But if they feel like that system is constantly going on a regular basis where, all right, we got somebody new, but we're still functioning in the same way, that really works out. So it's kind of a major point of emphasis on what we're doing right now with my staff, actually. Because part of it as being a leader in that position is getting everyone to feel like they have ownership in your program to an extent. And I think, obviously I could have, when Joel got here, he said, hey, you're doing this and this is how you're going to do it. And you probably would have left in 6 months, but that's, knowing you, but that's, some people won't, and they'll stay there and, they'll fight through it, but they won't ever be happy and they won't ever take ownership in that aspect of it. So from my end, being in that leader position, that's one of the major emphasis I need to make in building a system. Hey, what do you think we need to do? How would you run this program? All right, well, this is how we do it here. This is what you're trying to do. This is just how we do it, and trying to translating it to our new staff coming in that way, that you're going to get the same thing out of it as what you're trying to do, but now we're just going to do it in this manner instead. And again, giving them a lot of freedom on what they want to do, having them have full autonomy over their team as far as programming wise helps build that trust. Again, it's just kind of keeping that overall umbrella of how we want to do things in it. And as long as you're inside of it, then we're good to go. And you can kind of experiment on your own as we go through. And as a young coach, I think that, our coaches appreciate that because they're not just getting told what to do on a regular basis. They're actually having to think for themselves. And for me, they're not just going to take a cookie cutter program or something and put it in. And then they're also going to have to think about themselves when they go somewhere else. They're not just going to take that, this is how we did it here. This is how we're going to do it here. This is how we're going to do it here. No, you have to think outside of your means. And yeah, obviously, if we had safety squat bars on every rack, that'd be great, but we don't. So, some stuff that you see and learn that you came from other places with, you're going to have to really kind of use your mind and open up and try to get what you want out of it. And I think that's what it is. But getting everyone on the same page is really, from a leadership standpoint, on what I've read on everything along that, it's just getting everyone to feel like they have major ownership in what they do in the program that we run, and not just for their team individually, but as a program themselves, and make sure that everyone's valuable to it. So I constantly ask them all the time, hey, do we need to change up how we do this? Do we need to do this? And we bounce ideas off each other. And when we collectively come to a group setting, that's what it is. But when everyone first gets here, we kind of tell them exactly, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And you guys can experiment from there. And then we'll kind of dive into it as we go through. But like Joel knows, I always tell, anybody that I hire, I don't ever want a yes man. I don't ever want somebody to just come in and say, yes, sir, this is what we're doing, yes, sir. Like, no, I want you to think, if you don't agree with something, or if you think there's a better way to do it, let's talk about it. Because that's going to overall, whether you're here in a year or not here in a year, that means that our program at Nichols got better overall. So I think that's one of the major things we get in kind of doing that. But for the athletes, that's the toughest part, is getting somebody new on a regular basis and keeping that system of flowing the way that they're used to is really what kind of gets them to buy into whoever we bring in.
Mm-hmm. Taking it one step further, even like with sport coaches, does having that system build a little more trust? And even from like your perspective, you're director and you program directly for football and volleyball, but is it essentially maybe not force you, but put you in the situation where you have to have maybe a little better relationship with the other sport coaches that you don't directly work with, so that there is that little bit more of a trust?
Yeah, absolutely. And then, from my end, obviously, being the person that oversees everything, I do make sure that I'm in a lift of some kind on a regular basis with all my teams, with every sport. And that's just because this way I always have a way to feedback coaches when they ask me on something or that line. But I think with them building that trust as far as, yes, this is our system, we know how things are going to get done. And for me, luckily, the majority of the coaches that got here when I got hired are still here pretty much for the major sports. So they've known that even when it was just me and a GA, that everything flowed well and that, their teams were getting taken care of in the right way. So that put a lot of trust right away. And as we just got more people, it just got better and better, because now we have our system in place that we do, but now our individual coaches can now get out to practices and work with your teams a lot more out there as well. So that builds an area of, all right, now this individual sees what I'm doing with my team on the field. I know what they're doing with the team in the weight room based off of, Coach Greg's philosophy as a program. So we know that we're doing the right things for our athletes at that time. And I think that's one of the major aspects of it is, anywhere you go, the more athletes or more coaches you get, the more involved you'll get with a program. And that's going to build the trust no matter what. So I think that's one of the major things.
Yeah, I've seen that too. Even like from when I was there, when we got an increased number of coaches, it was okay, I'm able to coach my women's soccer sessions, softball sessions, and all the football lifts. But then I was also able, from a time constraint standpoint, instead of, I've got two other teams that I got to be in their weight room sessions, it was, I'm at soccer practice, I'm at softball practice, I'm at football practice, which just built, both with coaches and athletes, just a different level of, trust and understanding of just getting more hours around them, I guess. So
yeah, I think from our admin standpoint, I think that's one of the major things. They want every team to have us, and some admin at some places you go, they don't necessarily worry about your strength coach being at practices or games or things. But I think from our end, our admin wants us there. They want us as involved as possible with the teams, which is good for us because that helps us to get more people in. But at the same time, we understand now, like, hey, when we have football and we have 40 guys, yeah, everyone's going to be there. But when outside of that, we're gonna have time. We only have volleyball. We have 14 girls. Give me another coach, and then everybody has freedom to kind of go do what they need to do. So,
yeah.
And Greg, in terms of like developing your younger staff with just like the turnover you have, I know you give them a lot of autonomy with just program design and everything like that. How often do you guys usually do like any sort of set staff meeting or any sort of continuing education type stuff?
Yeah, we've actually upped that a lot since in this past year. Luckily, we've had, with Coach Taylor being around a lot more. One of our coaches, Coach Nick, has actually been here for over a year and a half, kind of took that same position that Coach Joel has and has kind of been running with it. We decided to start doing that a lot more. So we try to get at least an article review in every week. our guys started listening to podcasts now and then, getting into it. But we try to have at least one sit-down session a week to kind of talk about either an article or just, topics that we have. And then having a lot more coaches involved now too. We have post-lift meetings, some pre-lift meetings to go along the lines of it. And, I think the biggest aspect for us is that pre-lift meeting when we're going over our lift is when we get the most questions asked, and we can kind of have the most development that way, because it allows me to kind of break down our program and say, hey, this is where we are in our phase. This is what we're doing. This is why. This is the science behind what we're trying to get to it. And then from there, we just kind of pick articles off of that topic and we kind of dive into it a little bit more. So obviously, as Tim Caron is one of my major, mentors, one of the things that Tim always taught me was, hey, if you ever want to learn about a topic, dive into it with 4 or 5 books, articles, everything based off that topic, because you'll probably learn a lot more that way. So for us, we're kind of the same thing. If we read an article on acute versus chronic load, we're going to then read, a peer-reviewed article on acute versus chronic load, and then kind of ask people in the field who are really good at it. So we just had a staff meeting with Sean Conity, who's one of the, main guys who's out there talking about acute and chronic load. So now we took a topic we kind of learned about, got some scientific proof behind it, and now we're trying to work with somebody that kind of really implement it as we go through. So that's kind of one of the things that we did. And, we try to do that when Joel was here too. We read an article, and then we try to have a Skype meeting or a Zoom meeting with, that coach that day, because I think for that aspect of it is going right to the source. You know what I mean? Like, you can have an article that you read, discuss it as a group, as a team, and then, not still have a full understanding of it, but having the ability now with how easy it is to kind of connect with people, there's no reason why not to reach out to the individual that wrote it or something along those lines to really get into it. So.
Yeah, you pushing me on that when I was with you was a big thing, where it's like I feel like a trap you can fall into is like, oh, I read this article on whatever, Simply Faster, Just Fly, like whatever it is, some place where that's like putting out good content. You read an article, maybe it's 5-6 pages. You're like, wow, that's really interesting about whatever, resisted sprinting or something like that. And it's like, all right, cool, moving on to the next thing, or whatever. It's like throwing it on your Instagram story and be like, read a great article by so-and-so, and it's like, oh, great. And it's like, if you don't follow up from there, it's like, what did you actually learn? Like, it might have been a fantastic article that had a ton of application. And it's like, the one thing that you pushed me to do, which was great, was like, all right, now dive down that rabbit hole. And a month later, I had read a couple books and talked to people, and it was like, okay, I'm not just able to understand this, I'm able to implement it at a high level because I dove all the way into it, instead of being like, yeah, I kind of understand that, but like, I wouldn't do it in a team setting yet. Like, just get to the point. If you learn something new that's interesting, like, dive into it all the way until you get to the point where you could actually introduce it with a team on a regular basis, and then move on to the next thing. Or maybe to the point where you realize you couldn't introduce it with a team, or that breaking point, instead of just like, oh, I learned about this new topic, okay, next. Like, no, dive into it all the way until you understand it well enough theoretically and practically to implement it with a new team or a team that you're already working with. So I definitely, that is an area that you helped me with, where it was like, hey, stop, like, don't just like learn a million different things. Not that we don't have to be good at a lot of different things as strength coaches, but like, if you get introduced to something that you're maybe a little unsure of, like, go into it all the way until you know it well enough where you could implement it with a team and be fully confident in that implementation. So I really like that idea too.
Yeah,
I think that's a big trap. I think a lot of younger up and coming coaches are running into right now too, of just the prevalence of everything on social media. So it's just being like, oh, that's cool, I saw this person's post, like, I'm gonna start doing that right now. And then once they have an athlete that can't perform whatever it was that they were trying to do, they have no idea how to modify it because they don't know the actual like principles that actually back it. They just know that one application.
Correct. Absolutely. That's exactly what I was about to say. Young coaches, especially, like we said, it's so easy to get access to information now, whether it's good, bad, ugly, whatever it is. But the emphasis of that looks cool. It looks like, or that person is doing it, that means I have to do it. It really kind of just sets you up for failure. It really does. Because like you said, you don't know why you're doing it. You don't know necessarily the progressions that go along with it. And that's what it is. So going along the lines of just progressing my younger coaches in that aspect, I always tell them, like, if you do something or you find something out, you better start doing it on yourself first before you end up putting it in any athlete's program. Because again, if you can't do it, and that's one of the things I talked to my coaches about this year. I was like, I'll let you kind of do anything that you want to do as far as, programming wise. I was like, as long as you could defend it, you could tell me scientifically while you're doing it yourself. And if that's the aspect that I kind of took with that is, because one of the biggest things for me is obviously the ability to demo stuff, going that way. So again, it's most athletes for us are all kinesthetic learners or visual learners, right? That's how they're going to see something. They're either going to see it done right, try to mimic it, or they actually need their body to be in that position to feel what they're looking for, to go in that aspect of it. Very rarely do you ever say, auditory learners as an athlete is just not a big thing because they need to be put through it. And if you just think about the model of how you learn as an athlete, it's, go in your class meeting, go in your meetings for football, go over film, go do it on the field, and that's how it's done. You visually see it, then you kinesthetically learn it, and then you know it. So for my coaches saying it too, is like, hey, if you learn a topic or something, you better be able to, do it yourself, because that demo is what your athletes are going to learn off of. So if you're going to snatch and you think a snatch is the biggest movement that you need to do, you better be able to have a perfect snatch every time you do it. And then I know, Joel, like, you're big on this, like, it's coming out. Get out of the weight room. If you can't do a sprint properly, if you can't do a crossover run properly, what do you think your athletes are going to do? You know what I mean? It's going to be one of those things. I think one of the biggest compliments, and I think Joel and I talked about this when he was here, is when you do something on the field and the coach and your athletes are like, "Oh, coach, okay, I see you." It's kind of it's kind of one of those things. It's like, yeah, that's what we're looking for every single time. And it gives a respect from your athletes saying, hey, like, this guy knows what he's doing, or this coach knows what he's doing. And, he could do it himself too. So like you said, like, that cookie cutter thing of just finding something and starting to implement it right away doesn't necessarily work. And I don't think that's a great way to necessarily operate. I think that you have to, fully dive into something. And until you have a fully understanding of it, then you shouldn't necessarily apply it to, especially with athletes.
Yeah. And I would almost say too, it almost makes people fall into the trap of, like, they're so worried about looking like they're on top of their game with implementing all these new things that they never truly understand anything, like, in terms of scientific principles, actual application, and how to modify anything. It's just consistently doing whatever's hot. And then down the road, they don't even know what their actual, like, philosophy is on anything. It's just, well, these are all the things that I've done in the past, and this is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't explain a why ever.
Yeah. And, I think, joking about it, and not to discredit, like, Springfield College, but we all did that when we were there. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
we went to an internship. We came back. We did what they did because that's what we learned. And obviously we dove in, made our own different mistakes on it. But, that's just kind of the trend of, especially in that graduate assistant type role. That's what you do, because you don't necessarily know it all, but you want to start kind of messing around with it. So as you get older into your career, you should hopefully have a better foundation of what you are as a coach and what your main principles are. And then it's just really kind of picking pieces, that you're learning about to complement what you already do. And that way it always gives you the foundation of, no matter where you go or no matter what you do, this is how we're going to do it. And again, like, that system that you developed, that's going to take you anywhere. It's not like you have to change your entire system or you change your entire, coaching philosophy because you're at a new place. It's just, you have different equipment. So this is how we're going to do it here.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Do you see, like, I think about, like, the FRC, or I know when I was there, you wanted, like, continuity and all your athletes knowing, like, being introduced to the Olympic lifts just from, like, a skill development standpoint, because you have one coach who came in and was like, hey, I'm not going to do it for a year. And then also the next guy was like, yeah, I'm going to. Like, is there anything maybe, like, with the FRC, like, is that maybe something where you're thinking, oh, we're seeing enough benefit of this that we would want this to be a Nicholls State program-wide type of thing? Like, is there any ideas or things that you're seeing are, like, foundational enough where you're like, hey, maybe we do plug this in as, like, we want all our athletes to be able to do this?
Yeah, I would say if we're going to do anything like that with the FRC, like, those 90-90 positions with pails and rails, I want to see those in basically every single warm-up that we do, regardless of what team we're on. And just because those benefits of, again, fixing up that hip and fixing up that shoulder is going to be the biggest benefits and bang for your bucks as far as the time frame wise goes. So those are things that I definitely want to see. And a lot of it too is kind of, as I'm getting into it, I do want to see a lot more, breathing and breathing mechanics involved in what we're doing. And whether you decide to do it after or before is up kind of, I'm gonna leave that up to my staff right now. But just for myself, we've started implementing them more just as a way to kind of base ourselves guys back into a parasympathetic state with that, just because they're sprung up all the time, they're wild up all the time. So we've actually implemented a lot of breathing just in our warm-ups to get them involved a little bit more. And I think we've kind of taken that overall as a staff to kind of include that as well. So that's kind of where we're heading in that direction.
Yeah, I guess that even kind of sparked something for me, like a follow-up question for me, where it's like the benefits of maybe the breathing or the FRC, where the movements are inherently such that if you're not 100% focused, like it becomes very obvious very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so obviously you're getting the tissue and the range of motion benefits of implementing them maybe at the start, but even maybe more so, it's the benefit of, hey, if you're not completely locked in and ready to go for this training session, it's going to be incredibly obvious right away when you're doing your cars or 90 or whatever it may be, because they just inherently require a ton of focus. Whereas maybe just like, hey, we're going to hit some knee hugs and some lunges, like maybe it's easier to kind of skate through that. Whereas if you throw in things that are inherently require a ton of focus, maybe you see that side benefit as well going into the training session.
Yeah, I think we've got a little bit more lock-in on that. So basically, when we started implementing that FRC work and we started doing some hip cars on our racks, breaking them into those groups, that was one of those things where we had some soft tissue work beforehand. We kind of gave them a little bit of freedom during that to kind of talk a little bit and, joke around some if they needed to. But then we broke into two stations and we started doing some core work and some glute work and get that going, that pillar strength that we were looking for. And then we finished off that by breaking them into that team setting of doing all of our mobility work. So with that, it was, now we're separated in our room. So it's basically like taking the two kids that talk in class and separating them completely to the other side of the room. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because that allows, at that point, now everyone's focused and locked in. And we did it all on cadence, which was all on me, with the other 5 coaches going along the line. So the fact that, when we do things on whistles here, it works out a lot better for us because kids have to stay involved the entire time. And when we did it with the FRC as well, when we implemented some breathing to go along with it, it was, hey, breathe in, breathe out. And you could physically see whether their lungs come up or they don't. You know what I mean? So that feedback right away was big for us. And I think for them, we just got them to focus in and lock in a little bit more. And then we knew once we were done with that, then we're going to, start getting into our lift.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I kind of warned you earlier today about this question coming, but I think there's one thing we're going to try to ask like all our guests is like big idea topics, like can be completely off the wall. Like I know me and Andrew both always have these just like chats at dinner or whatever, like completely out there ideas that you're bouncing around in your brain, whether you want to implement it with football, volleyball, some program-wide type of thing, whether it's helping out with sport practice or something in your lift or speed or conditioning, anything that you're like, man, I've been mulling this over in my brain. I haven't implemented it yet maybe, but it's maybe kind of the next direction that you're looking to go. Like anything like that you've been mulling over?
Yeah. One for me, especially with our volleyball team, I've been wanting to really kind of focus in and dive into some, kind of reactive isometrics and, isodynamic movements to go along with it, especially during our power phases to kind of increase the velocity along with those lines. And then, just creating that pre-tension with them to work on that way. I think volleyball, especially being such a, springy and jumpy sport, I think that that's going to be a major factor on their performance overall. And really kind of just diving into that with them, being a smaller group will allow me to do that as well. And then tying that into how we're going to do it isometrically wise or what phases we're going to kind of put it into is kind of where we're looking at that aspect of it.
Cool. Is that something, I guess from there, do you have, even within a smaller group, are you able to split up them in terms of maybe developmental, a little more advanced?
Yeah.
Like, are you able to split up even within that group?
Yeah, I think for me with that group is actually a little bit easier. So just numbers wise, we have, like I said, we have about 14 of them. So we can kind of break that as far as the weight room is broken down to. We can put advanced in a certain area if we need to go along with that ways. But for our advanced athletes, I think that's, again, trying to get those reactive abilities for them is going to be a lot more beneficial than trying to get them strong and built up like our freshman groups that are coming in. We're trying to focus a little bit more on those specialized strengths with them. And that's really where we're going to kind of try to go. With our advanced groups, that's been one of the major areas I think that we've kind of slacked on or not necessarily been done a great job of is really kind of breaking those 4-year programs into, developmental team and advanced. And I think that's really where we're kind of diving into now, even with our small sports like golf. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, just because they're golf and there's only 6 of them doesn't mean that this person doesn't have a training age of 4 years with us and this one has a training age of 1. Like, we need to still train them as an advanced, lifter or athlete because hopefully by the time they're a 4th-year senior, they are with us. And I think that's where it is. So we're kind of getting into a little bit more of, the reactive strengths to go along with that way, the, speed strengths and strength speed focus of, our major lifts and kind of with our advanced guys getting away from that absolute, peaking, max strength that everyone's kind of focusing on still. And selling point for, our coaches is, the guys feel better. You know what I mean? Our 4th-year senior doesn't want to put 500 pounds on his back every week and have to continuously do it. He wants to be able to feel good. He wants to be able to take some skill acquisition work from the weight room and see it apply to what he wants to do on the field. So just kind of getting real specific with what we want to do with our advanced athletes for the most part.
Cool. I guess this is a little bit off topic from what we were talking about, but with your volleyball girls, I haven't worked with volleyball in a while, but just looking at like sheer number of jumps that they do on the field and they've done growing up and all that, like the ingrained motor patterns from those thousands of jumps, do you try to get in and like, all right, I'm going to influence their landing mechanics just by like, obviously overall you want to be like, okay, I want to increase their ability to land safely. Do you attack that more through I want to tweak their motor patterns / mechanics, or like I want to build their more underlying physical capacities, the strength, whether isometric, eccentric, their ability to kind of handle those forces? Like the answer is probably a mix of both, but which side do you kind of more trend towards?
I think, just from a training standpoint, we're going to be able to get that tissue quality in. So if I'm going to put more of an emphasis on it, it's going to be kind of from that biomechanical standpoint of it. Just because we're going to take, when we come back with our girls individually, we're going to take them through a kind of, we read an article this past spring on working from unilaterally to bilaterally in plyometric work, and just obviously the speed of what you can do it. So I think we're going to really kind of take that focus on with them. And if we could teach them really well how to land on one leg, odds are that's going to really convert over to 2 legs with what we do. So that's kind of where we're going to focus it with them is let's get them to land really well and be able to control themselves unilaterally. And then when the forces are applied that are going to be eccentrically loaded bilaterally when they land from a jump consecutively, hopefully with their training, that should be, capable of handling that load.
Are you guys doing any testing or anything like that to kind of just like justify the training that we're doing or looking into?
For us, honestly, I mean, yeah, we're doing some, just jump testing along those lines. But as far as a financial standpoint, from some of the things that we want to do, we don't necessarily have the ability to do that. So it's definitely something in the process of what we want to do, but not necessarily full out right now.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. With volleyball, I guess with spring sport, like spring practice and even like beach volleyball now with you guys, like how much do you mitigate their plyometric volume with you, knowing that they're getting a fair amount simply from just playing a lot? Like how do you work with their coach to be like, okay, today was a high jump day or low jump day, and how does that kind of flow into what you're hitting from a weight room or just training session perspective?
Yeah, honestly, for us, it's kind of hard to develop them. Just like you said, we just implemented beach volleyball, and we don't have a separate beach volleyball team. So basically, our indoor girls are just playing beach volleyball as well. And we are there for, I think this year we had 2 girls that played indoor that did not play beach. So basically, they were in season year round. With that, obviously, we're still trying to get some type of training adaptation from us. We do implement a little bit of jumps, but not a whole lot. We've kind of realized our coach is actually pretty good about handling how much they jump during practice and kind of, getting them in a proper pattern to kind of perform well on game day, which has been nice, and a little bit of a change from where we were a couple years ago. But for overall, I think, getting that standpoint of overall jump contacts, we don't have that technology to kind of see how it is overall numbers wise. My goal now that we have a little bit more coaching staff is to get in there and probably just get a clicker and see how many times our girls jump during a practice, and then kind of mitigate from that aspect. Kind of like Joel, when we went with football with sprinting, we took a receiver and a running back a day and just kind of figured out how much they sprint during a practice and try to kind of manipulate our off-season program based off of that. And I'm probably going to do that now with our volleyball team as well, and just kind of see if Monday is going to be a high jump day, then, we'll obviously kind of try to slow it down in the weight room a little bit and complement what they're doing as opposed to overdoing.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yep.
All right. Well, I think that's probably a good spot to wrap up. Definitely big thanks for coming on. I know you had a big help for me individually over my development. When I got to Nichols, I was like 23 or something like that, and probably had no idea what I was doing. But the autonomy, like you talked about throughout the show, was the balance between providing some structure for your young coaches while also providing the autonomy for them to grow was incredibly helpful for me specifically, where it was like, all right, being able to lean on you from like hey, I'm unsure on the XYZ and got some structure from you on that, but then also pushing me to, try out new things and screw some things up. And that is uncommon, especially with a top 25 Division I football program. That is definitely uncommon. So I've always appreciated that. And, but that overall mindset of actually wanting to push toward find the truth instead of just being right yourself. That mindset that you've pushed throughout your whole program definitely shows in how both your teams are performing, and then how much your athletes, kind of flock to you. Because that was one thing when I got to working with you. You worked with, football and volleyball, but then even like the softball, the soccer, all the other teams would be like, "Oh, Greg," like it was almost like you were just as close with them with any of the other athletes. So that was definitely created a top-notch kind of sports performance environment, and not just like, hey, we work hard in the weight room, which obviously they do, but outside of that too, like just the entire – it's good to see athletics departments where the sports performance department is one of the kind of shining gems of the entire athletics department. I think that's a good thing for not just the individual school, but then sports performance as kind of an entire field. It's good when those positions are kind of put in the forefront at the different schools. So kudos.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah, I think, just, growing as a field, as how young of a field we are, it's important to get young coaches to think the right way. And not necessarily, like you said, just take a program where you did it one place and take a program and put it somewhere else. You got to be able to kind of defend yourself and have the reasons on why you want to do it. And part of that is getting out there and, testing it out and trying it out yourself. So, in my position also, it's kind of a forced role. If I had a full-time staff of 5 people, it, probably wouldn't be as much. But, in our position, I want people that are going to come in and again, bring ideas to us and do things along those lines. I just talked about this the other day when I was talking to a group where they asked, what are our main sources of continuing education on what we do? And my number, one of my top ones was my staff. Being a younger staff, I want people to come in with great ideas that have hopefully been able to do it somewhere else. And then now, give us the opportunity to do it here as well. So, I would probably learn just as much from you as, you might have done from me. So appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on, Greg. Best of luck throughout this kind of weird break, and stay safe, and good luck whenever we are able to get back and start playing some games.
Yep, absolutely. Appreciate it, guys, having me on.
Thanks, Greg.
All right.